button there and get that going. Looks like we're going now. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk about employment practices in enrollment management this evening. And this is our group presentation by Ken Buck, Virginia Oberly, and Leah Young. And as we go into the introduction here, we're going to overview the importance of this topic, the purpose, as well as the methodology we used in examining this information. And I'm going to turn it over to Ken to talk about the importance of the topic.
Okay, sure. So why is this important to us? So what we decided was that admissions representatives and counselors, or advisors, if you will, are entry-level positions in enrollment management. And after some discussion, we agreed that it's pretty difficult to keep dedicated individuals employed in the field for the following reasons. The expectations of the positions, examples of that would be the extensive travel, the challenging work-life balance, the terrible starting pay, as you'll see later on in the presentation, Dr. Loomis, and the limited growth opportunities in the field. And then something interesting happened last spring. May 2016, the U.S. Department of Labor updated their Fair Labor Standards Act, which essentially increased the minimum salary for exempt employees, white-collar employees, from approximately $23,000 a year to a little over $47,000 a year, which makes it very difficult to retain talented individuals in this particular occupation. And lastly, colleges and universities are facing more scrutiny across the country with rising costs for attendance and coupled with the fewer pathways to better salaries in the profession. So the project purpose. What's the aim of the project? So our objectives are the following. What we're going to do is we're going to investigate the growth opportunities for individuals in the profession. We're going to consider challenges that colleges and universities face with keeping good employees and the potential career paths of the entry-level employees in the field. So in our investigation, we're going to ask the following questions. 1, how do starting salaries vary across the geographic regions in the continental United States? What other pathways exist for advancement in the field? And what kinds of challenges do colleges and universities face in trying to keep employees in these entry-level fields, in these entry-level positions? And lastly, how do individuals who are interested in the profession in enrollment management break into the field? So the investigative methods that we use, we took a three-pronged approach, Dr. Loomis. We took a qualitative approach. You will see that we have video interviewed two professionals from a couple of schools. I apologize. We interviewed a couple of people from schools discussing the hiring and retention practices. We also took a quantitative approach. What you're going to see later in the presentation is that we have recorded the baseline salaries for admissions counselors across 7 geographic regions in the United States. And then we're going to take a look at the literature we examined. So we're going to share information with you from articles related to career paths and admissions.
All right. So when we proposed this area, we wanted to see if there was any substance. We were kind of diving into exactly what Ken said, challenges to retaining good professionals in this area, if there were any challenges, if people were just leaving of their own accord. So we interviewed 3 individuals. We wanted to make sure that we had a diverse range of people. So we made sure that these were all relatively of that entry-level status. So nobody had graduated earlier than 2013. They also each had differing pathways in higher education. So one individual had stayed at the same institution throughout her career. She's been in admissions or enrollment management for 3 years now. One individual had switched institutions, and you'll find out a little bit later why that was. And then finally, the last person is looking to leave higher education and will be leaving the field in the coming weeks. So we wanted to get those different perspectives about why people were finding this either a really fulfilling career or some reasons why they were looking to change their pathway. So the first thing we looked into was why they were interested in higher education in the first place. So the first question we asked them was how they became interested in higher education. For a lot of them, it was experience as an undergrad. As we were speaking about prior to the start of this presentation, a lot of people get experience in higher education, or rather being an undergraduate in a collegiate environment sparks that interest of a field in higher education. So some of them are using enrollment management to experience higher education. It's one of the only fields within higher education where you don't need a master's degree, so you don't need an advanced level of study. You can pretty much hop right in. And so one individual was interested and thought that that would allow him to explore the field without having to, again, dive into a master's program without that previous experience. Another person that we interviewed wanted purposeful work. She had spent a year or so in the corporate world, didn't feel fulfilled through that work. And I think that all of us being in higher education find our work fulfilling, hopefully working with students in different capacities. And so she was really interested in making sure that the work that she was doing some good. She wanted to know that she was contributing to the greater good. And so that's one reason why she looked into higher education. And then we have a quick video asking that same question.
We have Assistant Director of Admissions at UM University, Nick Cook, here to answer a couple questions about professions in higher education. Nick, why did you get into higher education?
So I worked in this office undergrad as a student worker, as a tour guide, and loved the interaction with families and loved the interaction. It was that really ignited my passion for getting into higher education. So I was fortunate enough to start a week after I graduated in this office as one of our admissions counselors. So get to travel and work with students from South Carolina, Tennessee, Western North Carolina, and again, share what makes you all so special.
So once people got into higher education, we wanted to know how long they were staying and why they were staying. So the next thing we talked about was longevity in the field. So there's that traditional 3 years or life rule where either you stay in admissions for 3 years and then get out, or you're in it for the rest of your life. In my experience, we have somebody in our office who has been here for 43 years now, doing the same admissions counselor work. Barry Bradbury, if you've ever heard his name. And so we wanted to investigate a little bit further, I guess, how accurate that 3 years or life rule is. So for the individuals that we interviewed who remained in enrollment management, the one who stayed with the school said that she did so primarily because of the benefits of the institution. She's pursuing a master's degree. And so she said that after she finishes that master's degree, she'll reconsider whether she wants to stay in higher education, but for now it's the benefits of staying in the field. She also mentioned loving some of the unofficial benefits, like being able to go to concerts and cultural events and having a gym at her disposal, and just some of those opportunities that may not be as accessible in other fields. For the individual who switched institutions, it was really because of pay. He was still interested in higher education in general, but needed to switch schools because, quote, I just couldn't afford to be underpaid anymore, which I think is a really compelling quote. I think speaks volumes to a theme that we saw that ran through a lot of these interviews. So we've got another video, again, asking that same question about why he chose to leave higher education.
Why did you decide to pursue an opportunity outside of higher education?
So I realized in this role that I miss being in the classroom. I miss learning. I miss kind of having that relationship with the professor. And so I decided to pursue graduate school. And even though I'm not pursuing graduate school in higher education, I realized that being creative is a really big part of who I am. And so kind of my real passion in life is graphic design, advertising, being in a kind of creative environment all the time. And so I look forward to pursuing graduate school. So I'll be wrapping up in admissions.
So Nick is choosing to leave higher education. Before we really dive into barriers about why people are leaving, especially those successful employees, we want to know what makes a successful employee. So we asked these individuals what they thought would make somebody successful in enrollment management. Flexibility and adaptability, I think, are really high on that list. I mentioned prior to beginning this session that my office is currently going through the hiring process, and when we talk to candidates about what makes a candidate successful, flexibility is number one. And so as this individual mentions, you have to be willing to have your day go a completely different direction at any moment. The next thing that makes a successful employee in enrollment management is independence, because especially for those offices where an enrollment manager is also a territory manager, which would require travel, independence is going to be key. You have to be okay being alone for long periods of time and making a hotel your home base for a week or so. So moving on from successful employees, why are enrollment management offices losing those successful employees? Salary was the number one reason we saw a lot for people not staying in enrollment management. So this person, who also previously mentioned that he couldn't afford to be underpaid any longer, said that his student debt required that he switch to a different institution which was willing to pay him more. He's no longer working for his alma mater, which I think was a pretty difficult transition for him, but now he has opportunity to make a little bit more money staying in a field that he really enjoys. And then the same individual who mentioned previously about really staying in higher education for those professional growth opportunities, I think, as I mentioned, she will reassess after perhaps those benefits run out. After she receives her master's degree, if the salary still isn't at the level that she's looking at, then she'll probably choose to leave. And she is still at that entry level. She's only been here for 3 years or so, or at her institution for 3 years, but that still makes her entry level. But I think after that master's degree, she'll be seeking something with more opportunities for additional compensation. The next barrier to retaining talented employees was flexibility and the quality of life. So just as it's really important for those individuals who are working in the field to be flexible, it's really important for the institution to value those individuals' quality of life as well. And so if an office can be more lenient about work-life balance when traveling, I think that was also the aim of FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and increasing the threshold for that, making sure that individuals either were adequately compensated or they had more time off. And so I think that has introduced an interesting dynamic. In our research, we kind of found that there's not, because there was a stay in that law, some institutions moved forward with that threshold and some institutions held back, so there wasn't too much research there. But I do think there are some institutions that are trying to create opportunities for quality of life, and I do anticipate that hopefully that will help them retain talented employees in the future. And then finally, it's difficult to begin a family. One of the people that I interviewed, that same woman who's finishing up her master's degree, just got engaged. And so it's going to be difficult for her once she does start that family to be on the road for 8 to 10 weeks a year. And that's really a strong consideration for her and will potentially be a reason that she leaves the field. And then another video asking what Nick believes are barriers to retaining good employees.
Nick, what do you think are some barriers to retaining good talent in an office?
I think some barriers, I mean, it varies person to person. Again, for me, it's really graduate school and that yearning for learning, I guess you could say, is really what pulling me out of the office. But I think some barriers could be salary, competitive pay at an entry-level position compared to other schools, compared to other admissions offices, could definitely be a barrier. And I think, too, another barrier could potentially be the cycle. Because admissions is so cyclical, it really does take a year to learn it. But after a year or two, start to seem the same, and then a third year. And so I think if you're not the person that likes routine, that likes that cycle, it could get a little monotonous. And so that, I think, could be a factor as to why people leave. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, so what you're looking at here, Dr. Loomis, was the findings we had for the salary data. So let me just make a couple comments on this, this bar graph chart here. One, we found it really difficult to get good salary data in this particular field. We went to the U.S. Department of Labor website, couldn't drill down to get really good salary information for admissions counselors. It was kind of generalized in scope. And when you went to like higher ed and those kinds of things, you really couldn't really get any good salary data. So what we did is we went to salaries.com, and what you're seeing is up to the minute salary data. So a little bit about this chart is these are not average salaries, starting salaries. These are baseline starting salaries for admissions counselors across these 7 geographic regions in the United States. And they are in the lowest percentile, in the 10th percentile. So that's what you're looking at. So just sort of, taking the first blush look at the chart, you see the salaries range anywhere from, low to mid 30s to the high 20s. So as the data suggests, as what we have heard anecdotally, the salaries for these entry-level positions are really, really bad. So for instance, this Northeast salary is a Boston salary. The Mid-Atlantic salary is a Washington, D.C. salary. The Southeast starting salary is Orlando, Florida. And the Southwest is Phoenix, Arizona. The Midwest is Omaha, Nebraska. And then we have Denver, Colorado, and Casper, Wyoming. So what's interesting looking at these, they're pretty consistent. So, you would say that somebody, applying for a job in Boston would make more money as opposed to somebody applying for a job in Casper, Wyoming. But what's interesting about this is they are not consistent with the cost of living in some of these geographic areas, particularly Washington, D.C. and Boston. So you're making $34,000 and $33,000 respectively, and you know what the cost of living is. You have to pay rent, pay car insurance, buy groceries, those kinds of things. So it's a real challenge for individuals who are trying to work in those fields in colleges and universities in those particular regions at those salaries. So that was one of the findings there. So in continuing examining the literature, so you have like a career path matriculation chart we put together here. So in the left-hand column, you'll see the job title, and those are really sort of the levels you would see in an admissions office. You would start with an admissions counselor, and then you would go to the next level, which would be an assistant or associate director, and then a director of the Office of Admissions. And then you would have like a vice president or a dean of enrollment services. And so you can see in the right-hand chart, the average years of experience vary anywhere from 1 to 5 years at an entry level, from a half a dozen to 8 years for an associate director, 6 to 12 for a director, and it varies when you get to a vice president and a dean's level, just depending upon, we think, the institution. It can be anywhere as quick as 6 years, as many as 25 years of experience at those particular levels. So that was the findings we had. Thank you.
Great. And I did get, unfortunately, Virginia's internet cut out. I did get word from her. She is trying to get back in the room. So hopefully she will rejoin us soon. But we took a look at the literature. We went out and researched, and Inside Higher Ed had some great articles on competencies that are required or important for admissions counselors. And this really paired well with what Virginia's qualitative research found in her interviews. So some of the first competencies needed we saw are independence, which she also heard from the people she spoke with, strong communication skills. The next is something I hadn't really thought of before, but it makes sense with where we are today with personal experience with financial aid. There are more and more scary news stories out there about student loan debt. It can be overwhelming to think of all the acronyms associated with financial aid and FAFSA. So having a counselor that has personal experience with financial aid that can at least know the basics to share with prospective students can be an important asset to bring to the job. Being successful in extracurricular activities, as well as managing your schoolwork and being successful can indicate that you will be great at juggling the many responsibilities that an admissions counselor has to on the day-to-day basis. This, I think, is one of the things I see in my role in admissions, is to be able to tolerate gray areas and indecision. Every single admissions pool is different. Every single applicant is different. So really trying to figure out what is the best decision for the institution and the student as you're making your enrollment management plans for the year and admitting your class, that's going to come into play as well. So for those who, after hearing some of the challenges that we talked about pretty excessively, the salary and the work-life balance, these jobs are actually very much in demand. Virginia shared with us last night that they had something like over 200 applicants for those 4 jobs in her office. So these are jobs that people are looking for to get their feet in the door of higher education, to get those benefits, to maybe get some travel in, as well as to break into the higher ed field, or to get a more affordable way to get a master's degree. So here's some advice about landing your first job in admissions. And the first is to be direct in your cover letter. If you're coming from a different field, don't pull any punches. Talk about why it is you want to be an admissions counselor. Talk about, basically, you want to show that you have done your research. You know what you're getting into, and that there is a reason why you want to be in this field. Tailor your resume to show how your prior skills tie into admissions responsibilities. So even if you've had no admissions experience, if you've had sales experience, if you've worked multiple jobs that required you to have strong time management skills, those are all things that you can do to show how you would be successful in an admissions position. We recommend joining relevant professional groups such as the local ACACs, which there are throughout the country, regional ACACs, Association for College Admission Counseling, as well as the national and state levels as well. And that's going to give you a network of people to start reaching out to attend events and to give you more insight into the field. In fact, several of our sources were a study put out by NACAC on on career pathways in admissions. Request to shadow a counselor in a local admissions office. So I think this is really important if you don't have any experience. It is a really great way to see if it is something that you want to continue to pursue. And I'm sure, I think that parallels with what Dr. Loomis was saying with the internship importance. This is a great first step on your way to getting an internship, to just get a little piece of what it looks like on a day-to-day basis in an admissions office. You can volunteer for college prep programs in your area. This is going to get you practice talking with the types of students that you would be out on the road talking to as an admissions counselor. You would be, showing your volunteer, your ability to volunteer, being an active participant in your community. And I think we might have had Virginia join by phone. Is that?
Yes, that's great. The first time we've tried that. Yeah.
Okay.
I know I'm back by phone, trying to come back by video. So sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Voice, that's loud and clear. I'm glad I sent that out so you had the number.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So
sorry
college
for-
prep.
Go ahead, Lee. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So college prep programs are a great way to get experience talking with students who are going to be in school and also serving your community. And then finally, your alma mater can be a great way to get some training. Being a volunteer, alumni, recruiter can give you that valuable experience. So we also wanted to take a look at the frustrations that Virginia saw in her interviews to see if they showed up in other places as well. As the small sample size of 3 people that she interviewed, and we definitely saw parallels. So frequently cited frustrations include the poor work-life balance, the lack of growth potential, getting past that initial step up. As you stick with admissions and rise up in the ranks, the pay does get better. We had difficulty, again, nailing down specific data on that, but getting to that point where you are growing and reaching that growth potential can be a frustration. The hectic pace, including travel. I know before I started in admissions, I did 6 years in financial aid first before having a dual role in admissions and financial aid, and travel always seemed this exotic thing to me that, oh, they get to get out of the office and it's great, how exciting. And my first travel season, I was completely exhausted all the time. And I just always forget how exhausting all of that travel can be. The low salary, which we have seen in several of those interviews that Virginia did as well. So now I'll turn it back over to Ken to sum us up with what we have learned from our qualitative, quantitative, and examination of the literature.
Sure, thanks a lot, appreciate it. So basically, Dr. Loomis, after all of our discussion and research, what have we concluded based on our findings? So basically, the anecdotal experiences that we have discovered basically are supported by the data, and the data supports itself. The data supports it. The starting salaries, challenging job demands, and the limited growth opportunities are consistent complaints by professionals in the field. That 3-year rule that they talked about really sort of turns out to be a 6-year rule. We also determined that it's really important to maintain a work-life balance in this occupation. You got to really be careful about taking care of yourself so you don't burn out. And individuals who have really strong skill sets in the field can be rewarded, we have found, with career paths for promotion. And basically the data, as we said earlier, the salary data is consistent across the geographic regions. However, it is inconsistent with cost of living in certain regions. So those are some of the conclusions that we have determined.
Oh, wonderful. I'll tell you, this was so good. We should just take this whole thing and plop it into a course. So anybody that's interested in enrollment management would have the benefit of your insights. I can't thank you enough for following the discipline of a research method to put this presentation together. I kind of encourage you to do that, but I don't require it. And you, on your own, I think, decided to follow that process, right? What are the questions? And you started out, beautifully with these are the research questions that we're going to pursue. And then you let us know the methodology that you were using to address those questions. And you really used what I would call mixed method, both quantitative, qualitative, and you looked at the literature to inform some of the questions and really had up-to-date literature references. So, wonderful data. Virginia, you just blew me away with those videotaped interviews. That's the first time. Anybody, I kind of encourage you, well, the best way to do this is to either audio record or even better, videotape the interview.
When it freezes your computer.
Well, yeah, there's always technology challenge. I was surprised you were able to incorporate it into the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And that worked well, and the audio quality was good. And that's really the best way to reveal the data too.
Yeah.
So you can transcribe and analyze, but some of the other presentations had a picture of the person that they interviewed, and I was commenting on that, how helpful it was just to have that interview data come to life by personalizing it this was like a degree of magnitude better when you have the actual videotape recording. So that was beautiful, almost like a documentary. Field. So no, just beautifully done. And you looked at competencies, which I think are important. And you did a fabulous job of barriers, for people. I should mention the reason I turned down the job in admissions was because of salary.
Yeah.
I had 2 kids, and I'd already taken a big salary cut because I left government and went to higher ed, and they wanted me to take an even bigger salary cut for a standing position, and I turned it down. It ended up being the best decision of my life because I ended up getting another opportunity somewhere else at Penn State, so that worked out okay. But salary is an issue there, and needs to be addressed at a very high level at the institution. Yeah. And it's really strange, if you look at institutions that are really enrollment driven, it doesn't make sense not to invest in that professional staff in order to retain them and make them happy, right? So we had a presentation on the for-profit. Some of the for-profits were like rewarding, giving bonuses to admissions professionals based on the number of students that they were recruiting, which I think is terrible.
I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Just ethically and morally, it's just not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And but I think they were doing it's like, okay, we're going to provide, extra compensation and incentives, and that's going to be good for the organization. I think for private and public higher education, we should just say this is an important function, and we're going to professionalize this and recognize and reward staff, have appropriate compensation, because we have done that for development professionals. Yeah. Very well compensated. All right. And in my mind, really and I think outreach might be a little bit better. I mean, that was always my experience. The outreach professionals were rewarded a little bit better, for their work than maybe the admissions folks were, or student affairs. That may not be the case at all institutions. But in terms of development, administrators have made that commitment. And so they need to, I think, make the same kind of commitment to the admissions area, it seems to me, in terms of salary and benefits and working conditions and professional development and the like. So, yeah, just beautifully done. I mean, I'm going to save this. We'll give it a gold star on the YouTube channel so people can look at it. We should probably, really pull out the best of these presentations and make them available in future versions of this course. Because it's such a great contribution, particularly when it's well researched, the way that you did this with a lot of discipline. And so, I mean, in a way, you're ready for the other research courses that we offer, and other, and certainly your capstone should be well researched. So you've really mastered that, I think, in the context of doing that. And it is a challenge when you're collaborating and trying to do it together as opposed to doing your own research project. But, if you like this area of research, institutional research, then I would, encourage you to take the Designing Institutional Research Studies course and also think about further study beyond the master's. So, but I think you've demonstrated to me that you have that interest and ability to do that high-level research. So with this assignment. So just beautifully done. We've got, I waited till 7 o'clock.
I'm sorry, we were cooking outside. It was beautiful in upstate New York today, so I got on as soon as I possibly could.
Well, you didn't miss too much, but I want to first give you a chance, you and Karen, to ask any questions you have of the group.
First, I want to say, what a beautiful presentation. And way to recover from the internet going out, because I just got a notice. All of a sudden I got that my internet connection was shaky, and I was like, really? So I switched to the other. My son is a computer science major, so we have 2 Wi-Fi servers in our house or something. I don't know. I can't keep track of it. One day the FBI is going to knock on my door. I just know it. So, but the one thing that was striking to me was, and it goes back to what Dr. Loomis said, when development officers are are being compensated so well. And to see the admissions and enrollment management people not being compensated at that same level, it makes me wonder. And for those who don't know, I work for a private school. I think to myself, why are we out there trying to get all this money? Who are we getting it for if we're not getting the right class of students coming in? And who's getting the right class of students coming in but our enrollment management people? And, I think about when we get our emails, there is nothing more exciting for me. I work in student accounts. There's nothing more exciting for me than when we get that email that says we've hit our budget number for the number of students that we want to get. And I know I'm a little corny in this regard, but the first thing I do when that email comes is I send an email to the admissions team who's on the first floor. I'm on the second floor, they're on the first floor. I send an email congratulating them on all of their hard work. These are people who travel away from their families, and I just don't think that there's, and sometimes I know money is an object for some people, but when you look at a lot of the research, job satisfaction, money is usually not the top. It's being recognized and appreciated. And so, when somebody says you're doing a great job, and, for me, as I've shared with other groups, I took a large cut in pay to leave commercial banking to go into higher ed. So I'm just the opposite, not leaving higher ed because of money. I took a cut in pay to go to higher ed. But at the same time, where I'm at, I get to see students for 4 years, where the enrollment management folks, generally speaking, once the student arrives on campus, they're kind of handed off. And all of a sudden your cycle starts again. So I would love to see this presentation be viewed by the people who are making the decisions so that they realize just how important the work that you're doing is. And those of you who are doing it, I appreciate it. It makes my job relevant. It makes me have a job. And it's something that I greatly appreciate. So for that, I want to say thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for that feedback.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
Karen, any comments or questions?
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hi.
I was wondering if you think it's realistic to expect that universities will change the culture to facilitate a work-life balance for staff, because there's a lot of hype about work-life balance for employees, but I don't see any real policies being created or implemented, like telecommuting, to facilitate that. So from your research, did anything come up to show that universities were actually going in that direction?
Yeah, I think one thing in particular that has been challenging for campuses was the implementation of FLSA, and I mentioned we weren't really able to find too much of that because some institutions are choosing to move forward with the Fair Labor Standards Act regulations and bump up some employees to that threshold, and some are choosing not to move forward. It really depends on, I think, how far along they were in the process when that stay was enacted. But I do think that was rather the biggest opportunity for campuses to actually initiate change. I think without something like that in place, there's very little hope. The institute, not very little hope, that sounds doom and gloom, but I don't think there's really too much of an opportunity for campuses to take a look back and say, okay, do we take away from this other student service to give to enrollment management professionals who are already going to be in the field? I mentioned that our office is currently hiring, so even though, and I'm not sure if this was mentioned while I was out there for a little bit, but Leah, did you mention that at all?
I did. You got several hundred applications.
Yeah, for 4 positions, and at the time we were only advertising 2 positions. We received 269 applications for 2 positions. And so even though these are historically underpaid positions, I do think they're still really sought after. So I think until you have lower demand, or rather, lower lower supply. Yeah, I was a psychology major, but lower supply of candidates for these positions, and there's really no incentive for them to look into the salary increase outside of something like FLSA.
Okay, so I'm not in the American system, so can you give me a background of what that fair labor thing?
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. So the Fair Labor Standards Act is a national regulation. It's not specific to higher education, but it says that anybody who makes less than $47,000 and change is eligible for overtime, which particularly for higher education institutions and enrollment management offices became really problematic because of all the overtime that's worked during travel season. It's just really hard to track hours during travel season because you're on the road for 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the institution. And so that became a particular struggle. So institutions had to decide whether you bump those enrollment management professionals to a level at which they normally do not experience. 47 is, as Ken pointed out in his slide, much higher than most entry-level enrollment management professionals are going to be making. Or do you have them track overtime, which in some ways can reduce just job satisfaction in general if people are constantly having to take time off to flex their hours. That's something that our office is dealing with. So hopefully that gives some clarification. I know part of my responsibilities are to manage the Fair Labor Standards Act, so I throw FLSA around like everybody works with it as much as I do, but hopefully that gives some context on what that law did to the world of higher education.
And I think as far as work-life balance, it really varies institution to institution, and not only that, but from office to office and supervisor to supervisor. So I think that is something that's really important to try and suss out in the interview process, how much of a priority that is. That's something that I asked in my interview process, and I should have gauged better from the reaction of, well, that might be in question. But you know, I've sort of made it a point to look out for the work-life balance of my colleagues, as well as like holding each other accountable to try and make sure we're doing that self-care and creating an office environment where that is set as a priority, so that we don't burn ourselves out, because we're an office of 3, so very small.
Are you seeing any impact of technology kind of reducing the travel required? You know, because students can learn more via the web, do virtual tours, or even information sessions like this online, where the campus visit then becomes the most critical thing. And then, you know, you're working on campus and you're hosting people visiting, or after the admissions offer visits, that kind of thing. Are you seeing any impact at all, or are we still doing as many high school visits as we did 20, 25 years ago, do you think?
Yeah. Anecdotally, my office has increased our travel, but that's also due to campus initiatives around diversity and inclusion and trying to expand our reach on the types of students that we're recruiting to campus. I have seen less so from platforms like this, but social media, I think, is becoming the primary way that students are learning about institutions. Last travel season, I saw a dramatic decrease in the number of students who were attending college fairs and attending my information sessions, and hopefully that's not due to my efforts in the area. But I do think you're right. I think students are not as interested in that face-to-face conversations. They don't value, and I'm putting words in their mouth, but I don't think they value as much that interpersonal communication to learn about a campus and an institution. They're going to social media, they're going to websites, they're doing the virtual tours, all those types of things. So our office has tried to keep up with that. There's something called ZME. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that company, but it's essentially Facebook for college admissions. I have some personal feelings on it as a platform, because I think it just adds to some of the stress for students.
Yeah.
But that is an opportunity for them to engage via the internet through pictures and different types of things that don't normally come across in the application.
Yeah.
And in the law school admissions arena, this is more of an add-on rather than a substitution. So we're not really traveling any less. We're just then getting more, because right now I feel like it's still an experimental phase of seeing what really does draw in the students, but we're too afraid to not do the in-person travel as well.
Yes.
Also because of where law school applications are right now. I think we're all throwing everything up against the wall to try and get student interest up.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's going to vary based on your geographic location, type of institution. All those things are factors.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, your presentation really focused very nicely on admissions. And I'm just wondering, the umbrella of enrollment management, to you, what do you think that encompasses today? And I had a sense of what I thought it was years ago, but maybe it's changing and you're more up to date. In terms of the various functions, what would it include at a typical institution if you're vice president for enrollment management? Like, what would be your portfolio and scope of responsibility?
So let me speak to that from a community college perspective, because it's really unique. So Rich Lilly is our vice president of enrollment management at CCBC. He is responsible for admissions, advising, and interestingly enough, he is also in charge of our marketing department.
Oh.
So anything with regard to literature, our website, those kinds of things. Also with community college, it's different. So, community colleges were built on the community. So we take everybody. So with that being said, you can imagine what our admissions department looks like. We spend most of our time just processing applications.
Yeah.
We already have agreements through dual enrollment with all the area high schools in Baltimore County and the region and those kinds of things. So we spend a lot of our heavy lifting in just processing applications and trying to get all of these underprepared students advised correctly when they're coming to the community college. So, our admissions folks get to go home and get in their beds every single night.
So yeah, not much high school travel.
Right, no.
That kind of thing beyond your area. Yeah, that's nice.
Right.
And how about financial aid and registrars? Would that be under the enrollment management?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Financial aid, the registrar, all of those things would be under the vice president of enrollment management, yes. And
advising would be kind of pre-enrollment advising and then ongoing advising, careers counseling, that kind of thing? So yes, we get a lot, like particularly this, the center that I am the director of, our advising office, student services offices upstairs. So people will come in just off the streets and we'll advise right there on the spot. And then they'll go down the hall and then they'll do their placement testing as well. Very good. They'll get a test score. And then, at the community college, you have right up basically into the first week of class to enroll. And Virginia, would that be the case at Elon, the enrollment management umbrella? Does that include all those functions?
Not nearly that broad.
Okay.
Our vice president actually just changed interestingly enough, changed his title from vice president for admissions and financial planning to vice president of enrollment management, which is not normally the terminology that we've used as an institution. But he oversees pretty strictly graduate, undergraduate, and financial planning. I think there are certainly other areas, to Ken's point, there are other areas that I think contribute to reasons why students come to a campus, and maybe they should be under. Greg Zeiser is our vice president of enrollment management, and he works closely with our marketing office, but he doesn't oversee it. There's a different vice president for that. So he has a very specific umbrella that he's working under, and I think it's maybe more in what you used to think would be strictly enrollment management, but that's really interesting, Ken, that yours is so expansive.
And would the advising function at Elon be more decentralized on the academic side, or you have a special advising unit?
We have a separate advising unit, and that I'm not sure if that, I guess that falls under student life in general. We also have student life, student affairs as two separate functions, which is curious. But we do have academic advising in a separate separate location and located under a separate umbrella.
Okay, and Leo, you have everything right there.
Yeah, we're small and lean. We're a small and lean operation, so admissions and finance. We don't have the term enrollment management at all at
Admissions financial aid.
Used just specifically, but my role encompasses both admissions and financial aid.
And the registrar would be the university registrar, right?
Actually, we do have our own registrar.
You do, okay. And that would be separate from your area of responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they would, incorporate all of that into at least with dotted line communication. The registrar, the bursar, financial aid, admissions, and even marketing and recruitment would be part of that. And, and then some relationship with advising from the perspective of retention. And some kind of feedback loop, probably back to admissions. So if we're accepting students who aren't being successful, and we learn more about that through the advising function, that kind of thing, then that might influence some admissions decisions, that kind of thing. So, and I think that was the idea, that there would be that kind of collaborative, ongoing communication with some senior level position at the institution forcing that conversation to take place periodically. But I think it happens on paper, probably not as much in practice because everybody's so busy doing their area of responsibility. But yeah, I think that all that is just so important. And what a great opportunity for people to learn about higher education and really become very good counselors and relationship managers and representatives of the institution through the admissions profession. So, yeah, I think, we probably have maybe 10, 15, 20% of our students have some experience in that area.
Yeah.
And then some trying to get out and do out of admissions and have more contact with students because they enjoy working with students through their career in higher education, not just on the front end. So we hear that a lot. But well, let me wrap up with my question about process. I've given you accolades for the results, but I'm sure it wasn't easy to get there. And I'd be interested in how you arrived at this kind of approach to the assignment, to look at it like a research project, to use a disciplined methodology in collecting your data, to record the interview that was critical to your findings, that kind of thing. How you arrived at that, how you work together collaboratively, what you learned from each other, and then what you might be taking away from this assignment individually in terms of understanding about collaborative work, or maybe your own perspective on your career path may have changed a little bit through this assignment and the course. So just any kind of wrap-up reflections that you'd like to share.
Sure. I'll go first. I actually thought that this was a pretty seamless process. I really enjoyed working with this group, and we just sort of looked at the assignment and looked at, once we came up with our plan, we decided to stick with the organization we had for our plan. And because we were in those buckets of qualitative, quantitative, and looking at the research, it was really easy to divide that up and then come back together and look at it as one, and put it into a cohesive PowerPoint. I actually find, once you actually set the organization of the research, then putting it together becomes much easier. So I think we worked better that way by being organized, and setting the outline, and then just keep going back to it and inserting what we had found into those parameters that we set up as a group. And we did all of our meetings by video conference, which was great. I had never done that before. And it was also just beside the project, the collaboration and having being in an online course, this is my second semester, and the last course didn't have any sort of interaction with classmates other than discussion boards. And it was so nice to just be able to be like, oh, what did you think about this assignment? Did you interpret it this way? Oh, no, I was thinking this way. Oh, we might want to email Dr. Loomis to get some clarification. But just having that ability to talk it out that way was really helpful to me. And just, it really, I think was the first time I felt a strong sense of camaraderie with other people in the program because of that face-to-face interaction live.
Great.
I would echo that as well. I thought it was an incredibly seamless process. This is my first class, so I guess I don't have that juxtaposition of necessarily being able to see lack of interpersonal communication versus what we had, but I think we were also a very agreeable group. I also enjoyed working with both of you as well. But it was fairly easy to land on a topic. We threw one out there, and I think we were all pretty open to other topics, but it was a topic that made sense and seemed to apply to the project well. And then we just divided it up, and I don't think there was ever any type of thing like those videos that we watched where where group to work with. I think we all were willing to take on tasks to make sure that the work was spread evenly as best we could. And I thought it ended up being a lot easier than I thought. With an online program, I think, to echo Leah, I do think that it can be concerning about whether or not it's all going to be web conferencing. What does web conferencing look like? Do you have internet problems all the time and people have to go black screen for a little bit? But it was so much easier than I was expecting. And I think it was the agreeableness of our group and the nature of the project itself. And we were all really able to find times, which was also a little surprising. We met, there were weeks when we met 3 weeks in a row, all Wednesdays at 8:00. And so that also, I think, really helped with having some scheduling to the class and to the web conferencing. I think that helped just with my personal planning and feelings of cohesion with the group.
Yeah, Dr. Loomis, I would certainly concur with what Leah and Virginia said. So, as you and I, as I have shared with you privately, sir, I am just, 32 years getting back in the academic game. So my confidence level was wavering a little bit, but working with this group, and I have to be quite honest with you, Leah and Virginia did all the heavy lifting. I appreciate Virginia's leadership, and Leah did a wonderful job of setting up the platform for our presentation. Yes. And all we had to do is just drop in throughout the week and add to the PowerPoint, so it worked out really well. So.
I thought tremendous, seamless teamwork. Yeah.
Leo, so well planned, it wasn't improvisational at all.
Other than losing Virginia for a moment.
and Virginia, I have to say that your timing was impeccable tonight.
I know.
That could have happened during your slide.
It was kind of perfect. Although I was concerned that maybe Dr. Loomis, you would think that I just finished and
I'm done now.
No, I knew something happened there.
Well, I hate to admit it, but I heard the little ping go off on my notifications, and I was like, "Oh, that's bad timing for a noise to make." And then I looked and you said, "Oh no, I'm trying to come back in," and I hadn't noticed you were gone. So that was that was my bad.
Leo, you mentioned, I'm so happy to hear that, like, you function as what I would call a learning team. I try to give you that label, so you work beyond the assignment. And I don't know if maybe you're taking another course. So if that's the case, you could kind of touch base on that course too. And so just to process what's happening in the week. And I do think when you have the video component, it just makes it a little bit more like the classroom environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the opportunity to do synchronous work, we couldn't deliver the instruction like that every week because of challenges. But the fact that you can get together in small groups periodically throughout the semester and process the course and touch base with each other, as well as work on this assignment. That's what I hoped would happen. So it's so good for me to hear that validation of the design from your perspective. The other observation I would make is that I put you together because I thought you had a common interest, but you also have a lot of life and work experience, and you're mature, what I would call mature professionals. Okay, so assignment like this really should be a bit of a piece of cake to you because it's something you do every day. You have challenges, you've got things that have to be done, you got to work in committees, and a lot of our students don't have that experience. They're either trying to get into higher education, they're in an entry-level job, they just don't have the work and life experience. So to them, this is a challenge. And I almost feel like I should have broken you up so that they could have the benefit of working with each of you on this assignment because, not everybody has that perspective. But, all the you'll see them if you look at the recordings of the PowerPoints, they're all very well done.
Yeah.
But this was clearly an order of magnitude that is so well done, I should just plop it into the course. Anybody interested in enrollment management, take a look at this presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Give you an overview of the current state of practice, the literature, the salary structure, the challenges of entering this field. And there are people that stay in this field forever. I mean, they start their career and they finish it, like you mentioned in your presentation, and they have a very rewarding career. But a lot of people want to do something else after spending 4 or 5 years. I think we need to address that in higher education to make it more of a lasting profession. Otherwise, we'll have too much turnover and shortages in the field. So, no, this was a great contribution for everyone, to my understanding. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm kind of sad this is the last presentation. I'm ready for the next one.
What am I going to do tomorrow?
Are you all taking courses this summer?
I am.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to take the summer off.
All right, Ken. And you've applied to the program, right, Ken?
Yes.
You're in. Okay, good. We have a few non-degree students who are just testing, this course to see whether they would do it. But yeah, you can all go at your own pace. I mentioned the other night we had one student finishing up the internship, took 5 courses in the fall and 5 in the spring. And he was working,
oh my gosh.
Wow.
Working full-time in residence life. So it is possible, if you get near the end and say, okay, I want to take 3 courses to graduate, it can be done, but you're probably sacrificing
5 courses?
Yeah.
I took 2 this semester, and I took 1 last semester, and the 2 nearly wiped me out. But
Yeah, I took 2, and thankfully one of them was yours.
Yeah.
Because the other one just about killed me.
No,
Right.
I try to make this one a little bit light when you're starting out in terms of workload. But I worry, you just don't get as much out of the course as you could if you were going at a more reasonable pace.
Yeah.
So you can complete the assignments and finish the course, but I worry that you're not getting as much out of the degree program as you might. So I wouldn't recommend going at that pace. So
Well, I won't be. Don't worry. No for that.
if you take 2 courses a semester, you can finish in 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
You take courses in the summer too. So I'll be looking at your program of study and your learning outcomes, and take a final look at your end of semester reflections with your e-portfolio. So I got my work cut out for me the next few days.
You'll be busy. Good thing when there's no more presentations.
Yes, and I'll give you feedback on your presentation. So, but I should have your grades in by early next week. So,
Well, thank you so much.
And please keep in touch with me. Let me know what you're doing. If there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
thank you for a great semester.
All right.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Take care.